All right, we're live now. All right.
As we are live.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. 110th 110th episode, and we're looking forward to it. Tonight we've got a special guest. Of course, we can call him whatever we want to call him. His actual nickname needs to be Mr. September, the way things have went for him this last month for sure. But so you're celebrating your 40th anniversary of racing. 24 wins and 82 top 10s in a year. That's pretty amazing.
I don't know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You started off these big special wins with a special at the IMCA Stock Car King of the High Banks at Marshalltown, which that cleared $5,000. Then you had the Jim Larson Memorial Dirt Crown Series at Worthington, which was another $5,000. Salute the Veterans Tour at Clay County Speedway, which was $3,500. Night of 1,000 Stars at Hancock County Speedway. Now we haven't got to September yet. These are just all big specials that you've knocked off in that 24 win thing at the beginning of the year, during the year. Then comes September, and lo and behold, you won the IMCA Super Nationals Stock Car Division and you're a Super Nationals champion, and you've only been trying for what, 30 years to knock that off?
A long time. That's for sure.
As long as I can remember, and that deal, I mean, you've had some second places in that thing, but it's just never been, that place has just never been super great to you.
No, I would, the last person I'd ever want to compare myself to would be to Dale Earnhardt, but it's just wasn't meant to be, and would-haves and could-haves, that don't get you that nice flag they give you for winning that deal. And just everything worked out. You just had to have the boon luck, and I just it's just been a while since I've had some boon luck there.
Well, it was an amazing show. You did a hell of a job, and you're very deserving of that win for sure, especially somebody who's waited so long and tried so hard. It's definitely a cool deal. Well, then, of course, that wasn't enough. You went to Deer Creek Speedway, and you won the USRA Stock Car Nationals, which paid $10,000 to win.
Yeah.
And we're still in September. And then you went to Knoxville and you won the Dirt Crown Series. And I don't know what that paid to win, but you won the Dirt Crown Series at Knoxville Raceway. So that's the total of your 24 wins. That's a pretty awesome season.
It is. We've been pretty fortunate to have some pretty good seasons along the way, and winning the big races and stepping on them big stages. At my age, you just don't know when that's going to end for us. And, standing on that boon stage as a number one instead of a second, third, or fourth was pretty special. I'll remember that for a long time. Maybe when I'm sitting, my wife gets tired of me taking care of me and I'm sitting in my nursing home, I'll still be able to maybe remember that.
There you go. No doubt about it. So
and then
you're celebrating your 40th anniversary. You have some T-shirts. So where can our viewers contact you to get one of those memorable T-shirts for your historic career?
Well, I need to get with my wife. She takes care of our Facebook page, and we've ordered them a couple times. And not to say we couldn't order again. We're kind of getting a little bit limited, but just contact Kelly Shryock Racing, and she will more than help take care of that order if somebody's looking for something.
Awesome. Well, throughout the 40 years, you've had some really great years, and you've had some years that weren't so good. Definitely had some stumbles along the way and some heartbreaks and some different things. You won your very first race at Fairmont Speedway in the number 5 car. And then, of course, the sad thing that came after that was the following week, you lost your father in an accident. It was a horrific construction accident. Uh, that had to have been a horrible blow, and it had to make it kind of wonder what direction you were going to go.
Well, I think, that there definitely affected me more than we think. As well as I know, watching me when I first started racing, my racing skills were nothing even close to what my father's skills were. And bless my mother's heart, she made a comment to me, asked me in as polite a way as she could, "Are you sure you want to be a race car driver?" And I'm thinking she's thinking about all the hard work and all the money you spend. That's not the direction she was heading. I think it was quite an embarrassment to the family name, per se. And she was as politely saying as she could that I wasn't very good. But, I've said this before, that I am living proof. You associate yourself with good people like yourself and Chad, and people that can help you along the way, whether it's just answering a question or a tech or getting you the best parts possible for your race car. If you associate yourself with the right people, I am living proof that whatever my driving skills are or wherever I'm rated or ranked there, without people like yourself, Bob and Chad, and there's no way I could have succeeded without the determination of just a never give up attitude and just keep trying and do the best you can. I lost my father pretty early. He told me a couple wise wisdoms that he had at the time. And we just, I didn't get, when you lose your hero and your father and probably your best friend at an early age, you kind of, you're at a test to yourself. And, we won our first feature, our season championship. And my dad won the next night driving the Smith trucking 37 car at Webster. So it was pretty cool to be able to finally give my dad a little of his own medicine back on teasing him that maybe the old man is just ready to retire and maybe now the young kid's ready to come through, and then we lost him on that Monday. But it's definitely it took me a while. I think it was always, I seem like I'm always being tested in my own little way. And we went the next 2 years without winning a race. And I think it was a test to see really how bad I did want it, possibly. And just the determination of not necessarily showing that I'm a good race car driver, just all the people that's helped me and working for you and having to answer tech questions to people and, learning not only from you, Bob, but, you got to remember when I started first racing, I raced against Mark Noble that had lots of years of racing, and Denny Anderson and Wayne Larson and Steve Coe and multiple other people. And we jumped into a big pond being a little fish, and, just the determination to be who we are today has helped us get to wherever we are today. So, there's so many people along the way for years that it's pretty cool. I don't know if and when we're done, but I really want to do something special for all the people that has helped me. And sad to say, I probably forgot a few along the way, but there'll be a big ass party if that day when that day comes. Not if, it's when that day comes.
Well, don't forget, you're 10 years younger than Schrader, and he's still racing, so you got plenty of time.
Gives me a little bit of hope. No question, Schrader, and there's a few other,
I think I see where he won like 12 features this year or something like that on Facebook.
Unbelievably awesome. My look up to sometimes for an older guy is Mr. Bob Sykes from Eunice. He won a race this year. He's in his 70s something, so it gives me good vibes to stay young and racing with these young kids. It's I've said this quote a bunch, but I still feel like I'm 25 at heart until I look in the mirror and see that old guy looking back at me and not sure who he is for sure.
Well, that new fancy suit, that bright colored suit's definitely helped you out a lot.
Well, that thing's been pretty lucky. At least in my stock, it hasn't not stood in victory lane very many times, and you just you just work hard, and we do work hard, and work hard does pay off, and you got to finish first, and Mike Howland does a pretty darn good job taking care of that old stock car, and I don't know that we've really DNF'd. Our engine program is pretty solid with the Cooterbilt, and it's pretty fun. I love my stock car, and my modifieds are still in my heart. Got to figure out a way. Might need some tech tips from you guys to help me get that thing up to speed a little bit more. But the stock car program right now is pretty solid.
Yeah, that Lake Mills Silver number 3 is definitely, there's just no doubt. And I haven't been to as many races to actually watch you in person, but I watched a lot of IMCA TV stuff. And there was one night at, I think it was at Algona. You actually started way back, quite a ways back. And I think Jim Horse started on the front row. And
yeah, that was a heartbreaker for Jim, for sure.
And then all of a sudden you got to second, and you could just see that it was like, oh man, and he's going to run him down. There's just no doubt in my mind. And sure enough, I was kidding Jim about that at the Super Nationals, and he really actually didn't see as much humor in it as I did. He said that was a tough one to lose. I said, man, I could see it coming. I chew on my wife's ear and my crew's ear. Don't let me be a setting duck, and it goes back to a couple of the sayings, and I try to mentor people along the way. One of the things that really sticks into my head of what my dad told me is make your last lap your best lap. Whether you're leading or running, you got to make that last lap, because we've won a lot of races on that last lap, and people think, in my early days, I probably lost some races, but I promise you I've won more races than lost on that last lap, because, make that your best lap. And, if somebody, thinks they got it won, and they take a breather, and cars are made to go a certain speed. And if you relax a little bit on that speed, your car's, probably going to get tight or ain't going to go as fast as it was before. And unfortunately for him, and it worked out for us. And just learning, coming from the back I always complain about that, but a lot of times you'll find the groove and get that guy out lead and be the duck. And unfortunately for Jim, he was the set and duck that night. Yeah, no doubt. Like I said, you could see that playing out with 2 laps to go, how this was all going to work out. But anyway, well, I suppose we better take a couple questions. Adam wants to congratulate you on your Super Nationals win, Kelly. Regan says, hey, Bob, I was curious, do you all run preload in the left rear with the 150 spring? Yeah, the preload all depends on, how your driver likes the car and how tight he actually wants it. With a 150 spring, we're still probably running 125 pounds of preload, or at least 100 preload. I think it's important with any light spring to have some preload in the car. It just makes the car get up on the bars, because your traction is actually all off the trailing arm anyway. So, that's kind of the spring just helps get it there to get the angle in it. So that's kind of my suggestion. Adam wants to know, on a USRA SSR B mod, 100-pound on the slider with preload, start out the year with clearance on the left rear axle tube from the underslung on the car. End of the year with the tube hitting the underslung bar, what would you do under race conditions that would cause this to be hitting? Spring fatigue? That's a good one for you, Kelly.
Well, there's lots of things, when you got your final, if it's getting closer to the underslung from where you're at, then I'd say you got something definitely flexing, and or depending on, so important on that chain placement on forward to back, inside to outside, right rear. How much right rear travel you're getting is going to have a direct effect on how much left rear and how much hike you're going to get. So, if you're picking up, some more left rear between, droop, we would call it, then more than likely something has changed with right rear, or rear ends may have migrated some, and that placement of the chain is ever so important on ultimately controlling that amount of hike in that left rear. And no matter how you play with that in the shop, I played with it a lot. What you think you got until the right rear goes up and you get them extra forces on that left rear, you'll pick up way more by a quarter, 3/8 of an inch of indexing, or you'll pick up more hike than what you can even somewhat simulate in the shop through G-force. And May check could help answer some of that, because I've tried to simulate something where I think I've got a half an inch between my underslung and the bottom of my axle tube, and shoot, we got a slot wore into my underslung from the axle tube hitting. And I've tried desperately to put my right rear up and unhook the pull bar and pull that back to our travel, and still could never simulate that darn axle tube hit that underslung. So there's some forces there that can't be seen. Ultimately, figuring, where you're at there and controlling that with your chain would be your best bet.
And we actually ran into quite a few times this year. We were using just a standard grade chain. And what was happening is the chains were actually stretching. It wasn't
most definitely. That's a good point. Yes.
I mean, it wasn't a good enough quality chain, so we ended up buying this stuff that's $10 a foot or whatever. It's pretty expensive stuff, but at least it has it doesn't stretch, and that's definitely something that we've run into.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We use a really good, I don't know, so whatever grade it is, log chain grade for tying down chain, bulldozers on flatbeds. So less apt for that chain to stretch for sure.
John and Heather Mathis is telling you they're the champ. Russ Daniels, Chad, is there a way to measure your Chevelle +1 lowers for straightens?
Well, that's one thing that we've been working on, is on our fab lowers, to try and make some fixture when they come out of the jig, so you have some measurements. The problem then is it's always on the car, so it's tough to do it on the car. We made the lower checker that goes over the bolt heads that you can use on the car. So what we tell guys is just to reference that number on a brand new one with that tool, and then if you go out and have contact in a heat race, then you have that reference number. Generally, most of the time they fold up, so that ball joint's going to be in a different spot. They either fold up or go backwards. So if you get that tool, it's just a quick reference tool, so that after the heat race, or if you have contact in a heater B main, you can check that number and reference that real quick.
Regan wanted us to know that he was talking about a sport mod with that 150 spring, which I kind of guessed that was probably the case. Tim, what is your recommendations for stock car spring rates? Well, it kind of really depends on your stock car. I mean, it's just kind of like everything else. I mean, depending on where the roll center is and everything like that. I guess I'll let you answer that, Kelly. What would you recommend if somebody called you?
What you're going to recommend is what your chassis builder's going with at that point in time. Or ourselves, we use the B&B and we have our own setup. I really don't know what Paul uses, but follow the recommendations, because if you're asking for help, it gets frustrating as a chassis builder to try to help somebody when they're using parts and bits of your information you're giving them. So whatever they're recommending, that's the direction you want to be. If I tell you I want a 250 in the right rear, then I want you to have a 250 in the right rear. If I tell you I want a 200 in the right rear, same. So following the recommendations of the chassis builder on the amount of steer, and on how the thing rotates. It's all specific to what front springs you have and what left front spring you have. So, there's not any one thing that's probably going to be a good suit and fit for everybody, but following the, what they recommend is going to get you the best. And then from there, go to schools like you Bob puts on, reading tech tips and, adjusting from there. You want to make sure. I've done enough, trade shows and enough tech seminars to know just to hopefully will get you pointed in the right direction to make sure you work on the right end. If the car's pushing, I don't necessarily always want to take traction away from the back of the car. You try to make the front of the car work better. If you're really loose, then you probably need, your front end is steering really well. You want to work on the back of the car. Because you're too loose, you don't want to undo the front end. You want to try to make the rear end better. So don't be stuck on any one number just because, somebody says you got to run 2 inches of stagger or 1 inch of stagger or 0 stagger. If the car is tight, put some stagger in. If it's loose, take some stagger out. Just kind of throw out and give the car what it's telling you it wants. The preload on a stock car on the left rear, I confuse myself on that. These cars will hike up, but then they kind of always seem to migrate back to your left rear to a somewhat of a right height. They do. So measuring a preload in a left rear in a stock car I just don't do it. I just don't know. We still are a little bit old school and do a right height on our car. And if you need more go, you put some more go in it. And if you have, if your left front's off the ground too much, then obviously your right rear load is not enough or your left rear is too much. So, put a couple cranks in the right rear and take a couple cranks out of the left rear. So, just try to listen to what it's doing and then I'll hopefully make the right adjustments accordingly.
Craig has got a question. B-Mod. Stalling through the corner like the key is being shut off. Have changed battery, distributor, carburetor, fuel pump, new spark plugs, wires, main ignition switch, solid together, new fuel filter, out of weight on my pickup tube, solid tries, different carburetors, sets of floats at different levels, fuel pressure through corner, added grounds. Have had veteran racers at my track look at it, and they are all flabbergasted down the straightaway. It's no issues. It's just right, like a freight team runs strong and weak of fighting this. I've never had an issue like this. Oh man,
that is frustrating.
That is frustrating. Craig, I don't know what I would tell you different than anybody else is.
Over the course of time, some of the silly stuff I've seen is obviously if you look at it through the corner, that's when the most amount of load demand on your engine is going to be. I've seen one scenario long time ago. His fuel line, a dude's fuel line was running next to the fuel cell. And when they went into the corner, the fuel cell flexed over and it smashed the fuel line. And then when the car went straight, it unsmashed the fuel line. And that was a scenario once. I've had engines run and not run through because in the middle of the corner when you're on the gas, that's your biggest demand. I've had battery connections broken inside of a shrink wrap or plastic shrink tube. Biggest thing is when you got a miss, for me, the first thing I'm going to do is, because sometimes it's kind of hard to tell if it's fuel pressure, fuel related, or ignition, is just start feeling everything you can and try to find the heat. If it's heating up, you've got a ground issue. So, it can be back in the day, I remember one time we had a stock crimp hardware store ground strap and it got rust in there, and that was our problem once. But, feel for hotness of any kind in your electrical system. And then, unfortunately, that's a bug I hope not very many people catch, because that can be very frustrating and expensive. And, maybe go to a chassis dyno where you could be on a chassis dyno and start wiggling anything and everything. Unfortunately, if it's running good down the straightaway, I remember back in the day, my dad had a miss, and back then we had them little, they were all run gasoline, them little Y deals that hooked into the primary secondaries, and you hook your fuel line to there. And it was on and on. Couldn't find it. Changing motors, just like he's saying. And simplicity of, I don't know, Bob, if you can remember the story. They was in the garage there in Estherville, and a crew guy was just so bored trying to look at things, and he picked up that little Y fuel inlet tube and blew on it, and it went pfft, and a piece of silicone blew out of one of them holes. And it was something as simple as that. So you can't overlook anything. Yeah,
really.
It can be anything.
We had one time where the fuel line was too close to the exhaust and was just boiling the fuel just a little bit, and then it would cause that took us forever to find that. And you know, the reason it does it in the middle of the corner is because the fuel's not flowing because you're out of the fuel, so it has time to sit next to the header and then boil, and then it clears out down the straightaway. So that might be something to look at too.
I would start with fuel line. I'd reroute a fuel line so it was way away from everything. At least start there for sure.
It would lead me to believe, with all the stuff that they have changed, that I still would believe that it's probably a fuel issue somewhere.
Did the guy say a battery also, Bob?
Yeah, they've switched batteries and distributors, carburetors, fuel pumps, spark plug wires, main ignition wires. You know, I mean, because there could be something inside the fuel line that's actually sucking shut, and only when it's under.
Could be something that's trying to get up into the pickup. No doubt. So I would go fuel. I would start fuel at that point.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, Jason, where would you start on checking how an IMCA modified is built? Just a second here. Is built without having manufacturer's information? Well, Jason, it kind of depends on really what you're asking about how it's built. You know, most of these cars anymore are fairly similar to something. I mean, not want to say that people copy other people's stuff, but you know, if they're all using that AFCO frame or that Chevelle frame, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's really pretty similar. You know, what's your recommendation, Kelly?
Well, old school would be is spend hundreds of thousands of hours on a scale. In today's new world, it's put that thing in dynamics, figure out your max travel on your right front, figure out where your ride rate where you want your right front to run, put that thing in dynamics, and figure out where you want to be there. Then get back to rights, because rights really in today's world, you kind of throw them out the door. We want to know where everything is in dynamics. You know, we're really just fine tuning, trying to make 4 one-cylinder engines work together and be the best it can be. So you got to find your right front load, your right rear load, your left rear dynamic to amount of steer and traction you have there, and your left front corner. So really, today's, you know, if you're a soft spring, high ride height, trying to get your deck up and your deck lowered, and you know, some of the ride heights are pretty funky. IMCA's kind of put a little bit of kibosh to that, along with the USRA actually too. So getting the dynamics to know where you're at, and then figuring out, you know, knowing that, you know, if you'd absolutely know nothing, you put a load number in there that you think is good. You know, if you're bottoming out, you need to increase that load. First thing, you got to get the right front so it's pretty low on the racetrack and not digging in. If you're digging in and shoving, your load is not enough. And trying to determine, you know, how much travel you need there is, once you achieve that number, the rest is a lot easier, because then you can, you know, try more dynamic, you know, more hike, you know, left rear rolled up more. I do believe there's a happy place where that left rear tire wants to be. You know, hopefully you'll have a successful night along the way where at least the car felt better this night than another night. You know, take a hard measurement on that left rear where it's rolled up. You know, so you have a number you can always go back to, so you can set that thing in dynamics. And you know, sometimes you can change your bar angles and go back to that same dynamic left rear placement of where that tire is. sometimes the car might like a little bit more up, a little bit more back. Not necessarily everybody. You know, kind of a misjudgment on a lot of questions sometimes I get is everybody wants to roll that left rear back to tighten the car up. And, you know, there's a point where that left rear likes to be. So if you roll the left rear forward, it might be a little freer, but you roll the left rear back, it might be freer too, because it's not making as much traction with that tire being back a little further. So finding where that placement of that left rear needs to be is probably your second goal to figure out, you know, is the steer making it faster or looser? You know, if the left rear rolls up a little bit, it's going to have more traction. If it rolls up a little bit more and picks the car up a little bit higher, it should put more load on that left rear, and the car should be tighter until your steer overcomes the amount of traction you have. Then you're going to be looser. So again, controlling that and being able to go back and forth with that solid hard number there on that left rear can, you know, we might try some more bar angle on the left rear. Well, if we were to raise that bar up, whether it be a 2-link car or a 4-link car, that left rear is going to roll up a little bit further. Well, if that makes the car looser because of the steer, now we can just lengthen the left rear back out. So we have the same amount of placement of that left rear, but yet now we got some more bar angle and see if that plants that left rear tire harder. So everything is a compromise, and, you know, just figuring out where you are in dynamics is really, you know, what we're really concentrating on more and more with our modified.
Well, and that steer number is so crucial. And the funny thing about it is it's a little bit dependent on the driver and how he likes the car to feel, because he might like it a little bit freer and like a little more steer in it. So like, you know, like Kelly just said, you know, lengthening the bars out so that you get back to that specific number. Man, that's just been successful. I mean, it's just like the cars.
Exactly. That might show you have a half inch of static lead in the car. You know, if you want to try to run some monster angles on your bars, and you know the left rear needs to be placement here, you know, you might have to lengthen out. If you start raising them bars up, you might have to lengthen that left rear out 2, 3, 4, 5 turns to get that steer back out of the car. So very important. You know, what Bob said earlier was, what makes one driver different than another driver on his needs in that race car. Once we're back to the gas and steering up off the corner, we're all about the same. But when and where you get off the gas, when and where I get off and back on the gas, what makes one driver different than another? He might need more stagger or more trail, where I might, if you're driving in the corner deeper and driving to the middle of the corner and you can kind of see the flag stand, you don't need much steer. You need go. So the guy that's backing this corner up is going to need to be a lot freer of a race car than somebody that's, you know, driving to the middle and lifting and having to get back to the gas. You know, in today's world, you can't outrun miles per hour. So, you know, what I do in my race car is when I don't know what it's doing or what I need to do, I concentrate on one thing. What do I need to do to go through the apex of the corner faster?
Yeah.
You know, if you can concentrate on them couple, don't worry about off the corner. Don't worry about a little bit getting into the corner, but what do my car needs to go through the middle of the corner faster? And if you can fix that, there's tenths and tenths to be gained there, and you know, to be able to get back to the gas faster. And if you can make 1 or 2 more mile an hour through the apex of the corner, that equals 3 or 4 mile an hour down the straightaway. And somebody's running 70 mile an hour down the interstate and you're running 65, you're not going to pass them. You know, they might be just as loose as you are. They're just going faster, being looser. So, you know, not always is it about traction. It's drivability to make your car more drivable so that you can just make more speed.
Yeah, and definitely phase 2 of the corner is the key. I mean, that's what you got to focus on, is getting through there the fastest, because that's the guy that's going to win the race. IMCA Sport Mod cars, great for 10 laps, then loses drive on backstretch and gets loose into turn 3. 141, dry slick racetrack. Any tips? Thinking about running a short shaft left front shock. Thoughts? You know, the short shaft shock, I mean, is going to definitely give you some more traction. It's going to make you a little bit freer getting into the corner, or I shouldn't say it's going to. It can make you a little freer getting into the corner, but it'll definitely, once you're on the power, it's going to put more left rear in the car because the weight from the left front rather than going to the right rear is going to start eventually going to come back to the left rear. So that's going to definitely help it. 10 laps and then it gets loose on drive. You got to focus on. Evidently the racetrack's going away, and so your setup at the beginning is good. You just need to focus on getting a better setup at the end when the racetrack goes away. And of course, 141 is a little bit of a tricky driver's racetrack because of how it's actually shaped. Turn 3 and turn 1, it can be they're totally opposite. So kind of keep that in mind. But you're running that thought, that shock, that's definitely something that I would try.
I mean, in a perfect world, if my race car was set up perfectly, we wouldn't need a short shaft shock in that left front.
Right.
If it gained natural weight on that left front and everything was balanced perfect, you would not need that. But boy, it is an awesome, tuning tool to be able to help you out. My first thoughts on the car giving up is I don't really use a heat gun, but I believe in my air pressure gain in my tires. If you're gaining 6, 7, 8, 9 pounds of air, guess what? Your tires are just so hard they can't keep traction. 2, definitely believe in nitrogen. That would be one area. 3, like Bob said, the track is falling off and the track is losing some grip. So, sometimes drivers don't realize how slow you got to go fast. And the other thing that's back in my mind would be is, if you got a bunch of left rear spring loaded in that left rear, it's going to free the car up getting in the corner. So maybe backing off a little bit of load in that left rear. We want to all stack that load in that left rear, but it can be your friend and it can be your enemy as quick as it can be your friend on making the car free with all that load in there.
Yeah, most definitely. It's just still back to a balanced setup. Justin, as a fat guy with higher left side percentage on a modified, where is a dynamic influential spot to mount weight on the right side of the car? Will it increase the tilt of the car? In my opinion, I always try to mount it, kind of in that straight across from the driver's shoulder, or straight across from your rib cage. If you can mount it, in that area, is pretty good. I try not to. Sometimes it'll go a little bit to the front, but most generally, right, just kind of offsetting your actual weight in the car.
I mean, I'm learning that I like to eat as I get older, and my suits are just getting a little bit bigger. And I'm sure I'm going to catch some grief on this, but hey, big drivers make good traction off the corner as long as you don't get too free getting into the corner. Forward bite, I believe in the back of my mind, always forward bite trumps side bite. So you can negotiate your brake pedal sometimes to get you in tighter. If you're fighting tight, depending on what you're fighting with having a little extra left side weight. But I don't know, in my trend, we're trending towards more left side weight, maybe for a reason on my own. But, that seems to, my car seems to have pretty good traction, and I wouldn't say, I don't know what big driver is, but I'd say I'm a big medium sized driver.
Second here, Jace.
Oh, he was asking about the clip being turned.
Oh, yeah, Jason's wanting to know about the clip being turned. How would you measure that to see if the chassis is built with a turned stub?
Again, your chassis builder should be able to tell you that. Understand and measuring from the front tires to the rear tires is not the way to measure that. Finding out what is square in the car and measuring from the front tires to a square point is the only way to tell that. Because, say I had some lead built in my right front, we sure wouldn't want to pull the right rear ahead at that point because the car's probably going to be way too tight. So figuring out from a ball joint stand back to a certain point on the car, and not necessarily even to the engine. So hopefully the chassis builder can tell you a square point and then be able to measure off them grease certs to that square point on the car.
Les has got a suggestion for the guy that has the miss. Check fuel cell for foam obstruction if running foam insert. Make sure not to block the tube. Very good point. Definitely.
At that point, I would take foam out.
Yeah, I would too.
Just to eliminate that problem. Make sure your fuel filter's in there correctly. But yeah, I feel sorry for that cat, man. I've been there on a, that can be very frustrating.
Yeah, no doubt. Chad Severe, two of the best in the business. Thanks, Bob, for giving a dumb kid a chance for his dream job back in the day. And thanks, Kelly, for teaching me along the way. Best time of my life working with Bob and Kelly. Well, we appreciate that, Chad. Definitely. I mean, you did an awesome job, and we appreciated having you as one of our employees. And, if nothing else, we always had a good time.
That's for sure. I was reminiscing.
It could have been like John Logan Kelly wanting to kill each other from time to time, but most of the time,
that was a few times for sure.
I just sat there in my glass covered office and just kind of lean my head down and go, well, I hope this works out.
I'm glad we're well past all that for sure. Yeah. Two stubborn heads collecting in the shop.
Brian Woodkey. Hi, Bob. Hi, Kelly. Well, I'm glad to see you on here, Brian. That's pretty cool. How's everything going up in Lakefield, Minnesota? God, I haven't been in that direction for, I don't know. It's been a long time. Been quite a while since I've been there.
There's definitely some stories for me and Woodkey. I asked Brian how many blues are they up to now?
Yeah. Well, I definitely like all his Facebook posts about his dog, because his dog looks just like what Bobby's dog used to be. And of course,
the blue was the cat.
Oh yeah, blue was the cat, right?
So I had heard they were at least on number 3 or number 4, maybe.
I don't know. He had a picture on Facebook with the cat and the dog the other day. Today's picture was the dog was patiently waiting to get permission to cross the road. So that was pretty cool.
Wow. And lots of memory with Mr. LL. That's for sure.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know how many days I spent up there. That was a lot of fun.
He give you your engine when you needed it, not a day sooner and not an hour sooner. When you needed it, you had it, but it was a wait sometimes.
Yeah, it was not out of the ordinary. Gary, I run a UMP modified, have run a pull bar and a lift bar. I feel like I get through the corner much better with the lift bar. I'm a larger driver, 300 pounds. Would the lift bar be better? Well, my opinion, a lift bar works really well on a momentum type racetrack. Some places it's got a lot of speed to it. And being like Kelly said, being a little heavier driver, your left rear load's probably a little bit better. So that works pretty good. If it's a stop and go type racetrack, I still like the lift arm. I mean, the pull bar better. I think it's just quicker to react. Well, what's your opinion, Kelly?
We run lift arms and pull bars back in the day, and my lift arm car drove like a Cadillac running down the interstate. You had to carry your speed in miles per hour, and you could carry more speed. You think about that lift arm being out there 32, 34, 36 inches and only moving 3 or 4 inches. I mean, the J bar stays pinned. You're on and off the gas. Your rear end isn't migrating back and forth. Just the drivability of that thing makes it drive like a Cadillac. There's guys I think that are getting it figured out to make more traction with it. But I think the guys that are really getting it figured out is making a pull bar car drive like a lift arm car. So we've got the traction of a pull bar and the drivability of a lift arm. And, I think that's, them things, I don't guess how many times I've had a pull bar and a lift arm underneath my car. In today's world, yesterday, driver A won with the lift arm. Everybody switches the lift arm, and then driver B beats him with a pull bar. But we've been pretty consistently on a pull bar. And for one in IMCA, we can't run a lift arm, but the open stuff, there's times when we've wanted to maybe do a pull bar versus a lift arm, or lift arm versus a pull bar. But it's kind of, we all are traction junkies, and we want the most amount of traction. And, if you got the right shock package on there, you can kind of make a pull bar car drive like a lift arm and have hopefully the best of both worlds.
Well, and it's evidently from your group that has gotten that figured out, because the two Chisholm boys made a lot of money this weekend.
Yeah, one really made a lot more. Can't say enough about them boys. They're just, I don't know where Dad was able to find the talent for their kids, but man, both of them are unbelievable, and it's awesome working with them. And we all, as soon as Smoke gets his skills dialed in a little bit more, hopefully in a few years he can be my driver. So he's a little aggressive, but God darn, he's got some talent that's beyond what I'm even capable of. So yeah, it's pretty cool watching him progress, and Jim just continually to do what he does, and that's win races.
Well, I met Jim a few years ago when he was still in the B-Mod class, but I had not ever met Joe, and I got to meet Joe last year up at the Harris Clash, and he's a super nice kid. I mean, he's very pleasant young man. Of course, they should be. I mean, the Chisholms have always been a great family.
It's amazing, the amount of knowledge that them guys have, and, with his dad, just putting together, I got to meet Jim in a unique way back in the day. They were kicking butt. Jim was kicking butt in them slingshots up at Deer Creek. And I tell this story, and Jim will probably get back to him, but he was just a little tyke. And I got to drive one of them slingshots. And back then we were quite booed because of our success in the USMTS, and we got to be a driver, and we drew up front. And I remember going into turn 3 that, God dang, we're gonna maybe get this win here. And the next thing I know, I'm got 2 tires hanging off of turn 4, and this damn little 24 Chisholm kid wins the race. And he's standing up and looking at me, and the whole grandstand is just cheering. You couldn't have wrote a better script. And he's looking up at me like he won the race. And I don't think he stopped winning since then. And it was pretty cool. Then he got into the B mods, and we've been able to keep track of him all the way through his career. And so far, man, he's for a young man that he is, he's definitely doing an awesome job for sure.
Yeah, he's had an amazing year, no doubt. Skylar Pruitt, how's my favorite crew doing tonight? Well, we're doing pretty good. Definitely, it's been a good night, been a good week so far. Of course, it's on Monday, but it's been a good week. Dave, had same thing. Have you tried the starter? Never thought about that. Craig, yeah, very frustrating. Lots of money already. I will get thermal imager out and see if I can find something that heat wrapped and wrap fuel lines and heat wrap and go through the top of the tank. I mean, I can see where it'd be frustrating. There's nothing more frustrating.
We had troubles one time, just FYI. We borrowed a magneto from Wayne Redmond, I think it was, or Scott Baxter. Anyway, we put a mag in there. So that eliminated all electrical, all grounds, unhooked the starter, and still had the problem. And it ended up being in my engine at that time. So we were ignition, fuel, battery. So we went to the magneto, eliminated every switch, everything, and still didn't. I bet I burnt off 110 gallons of methanol running up and down the gravel roads and Highway 9 out in front of the old shop there. and never did figure it out, and finally ended up being in the darn engine.
Les, question for Kelly. When a chassis moves to the right during cornering, how much does left rear spring lose with the rear end moving 2 5/8 to the left? Has to be unloading left rear spring even with running the chain.
So if is this a sport mod or a mod with a pull bar?
Well, let me go back and look here.
Either one. A pull bar car, it's really deceiving. Pull bar, when you jack it up, yep, rear end comes to the left. But when pull bar travels and the right rear goes up, the rear end goes back to the right. So believe it or not, your rear end, yeah, it migrates to the left when you're jacking under the bumper, but in dynamics, that rear end will go to the right somewhere around 2+ inches. A direct effect of the rear end moving left to right would be is how much J-bar split you got in that J-bar or the panhard bar. The more J-bar split, the more net gain your rear end is going to be to the left, but more it's going to migrate to the right through pull bar travel or right rear climbing up in compression. So that's, again, it's a little deceiving looking at that rear end. You jack it up, yep, it goes to the left. But I've had brackets on my rear end that's over 2.5 inches away from my frame rail. We're underslung, so something hanging 2-3 inches away and come in with big dents in my underslung because the rear end is migrated that far to the right under right rear end compression and pull bar travel. So don't forget about that pull bar travel, and the right rear going up in the air is going to move that with your J bar. It's going to move the rear end back to the right more than a guy thinks.
Jeremiah says what drives him nuts is a lot of people don't ground both of their heads. You'd be surprised what that can help keep the ground less than 3 foot long. Justin says, how will a softer right rear spring with a higher spring load act in comparison to a stiffer right rear spring if they have the same load at a couple inches? Well, I mean, a softer right rear spring, even though it's loaded more, is still going to react a little bit more lazy than a stiffer spring will. Now, it'll definitely probably get you off the corner better, but in the middle of the corner, it sometimes can be, a softer spring can kind of delay the action a little bit, just depending on how the car's set up. What's your opinion?
Haven't messed with that a whole lot, but you would want to look at that the same way you look at your left rear and your extended load. You know, depending on how much droop you're trying to run and what you're trying to achieve on your right rear by playing with different rates of springs. Same on the left rear, you take it over to the right rear, can dictate on, you know, maybe getting the thing to climb that little extra or not getting it to climb. You know, right rear load ultimately, you know, drive angles, you know, 2-link car versus 4-link car. Anti-squat still makes traction, whether it's on the left rear or the right rear. So you're just looking at what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, you can get the same load with a soft spring loaded. You know, that's going to pick up your right height some. So now you might have to drop your deck. So you're really looking at the whole picture of what you're really trying to achieve. Dynamic load is still dynamic load. But if you look at the opposite end of that on what it's going to, you know, the pros and cons with what it's going to do once you're in dynamics is, you know, don't forget to ultimately look at that number there.
Craig, actually, yes, the original started with sticking, so I had to put a new one on it. Going to try running a ground from the battery directly to the cylinder head this week. Only thing I can think of that mentioned was fuel, but the fuel pressure stays the same through the corner on my gauge, and have replaced the whole line filter and housing 3 weeks ago. It's a Bills built chassis, wondering if it's flexing and losing ground. Well, I don't think the chassis would be flexing and losing ground.
I mean, we do on our chassis when we powder coat, we do not powder coat our mid plates, and we do not powder coat the tabs that the mid plates hook to. And standard procedure, if I'm wiring a car, is probably going to get ground straps off of a ground to both cylinder heads for sure.
Yeah, that ground is a huge deal, man. Regan, do you set preload after scaling the car and get your bike number right, or before you scale the car?
Don't really care what our bike number is. We can do all sorts of different things with different ride heights to acquire, again, we don't race them on the scales. Once that chain is tight, whether it's a 2-link car or a 4-link car on the left rear, it doesn't know anything what's going on other than what and where the tire ended up being and how high it picked the tire up or the chassis up. But as soon as that chain begins to get loose, now it knows a lot. Now it knows everything that it's doing. So preload can affect you there. I mean, we can soft spring, drop ride height. We can do a soft spring on the right front, create the same dynamic of a 300 versus a 600, raise the ride height up. In dynamic, it's going to be the same. Statically, it's going to show a pile of wedge. So again, what I said earlier, don't be so stuck on a certain wedge number, because that's just a number and you're not racing that darn thing on the scales.
Yeah, that's definitely sure. Jeremiah says, don't run the ground to the battery unless less than 3 feet. Rob says, Kelly dropping heat. Thoughts on Nova lowers swap on a metric car. New York style dirt street stock. Most of these cars are Camaro clips, similar to what Joel's at Cole Racing is getting us, or has just been trying to keep us up. I have no experience with the lower control arm, lower.
We had, when I finally quit with Harris Auto Racing there in Lamar's, we had a Pierce car, and Pierce car had the Nova lowers on that metric frame, and pretty cool A-frame. You got to do a little shimming on it. I believe it's the front bolt. It'll fit in the pocket, but you got to put a shim in that front bolt on the front side, I believe, if I remember right.
Yeah, they're
and
narrow.
it puts the angle on the springs. It gets it where you can get a metric frame down, dragging on the ground, almost like a Chevelle. Bob was pretty sharp when he built them cars, and we were pretty successful with that Pierce car for sure.
Jake wants to know, when running a right front bump stop, what amount of percentage of load should the bump carry versus the spring max load? Chad, you got any ideas on that one?
Well, I mean, when you're tuning the bump stop, you're tuning your overall load numbers. So, if you have 300 pounds of rate in a bump stop package, you're going to have a lower spring rate. So, at the end of the day, like Kelly said, you're looking at your dynamic number. So you need to tune that down number and adjust your bump stack based on that. One thing that I see a lot is guys running too stiff and too short on the bump stop package. You're going to need to have a taller, softer bump stop, mainly because when you hit bumps and stuff on a dirt car and you spike that load, it's not good. We've had so many instances where guys just take the bump stop out and actually run better and just put the spring rate in there. The consistency that you're dealing with on a dirt track isn't there like it is on an asphalt track. So, when they had the rule where you can only run a short one, it was a waste of time basically in my book. So you're going to have to tune that overall load based on that down number.
All right, we are at the end of our time, but I'm going to go ahead and do these last 5 questions. Let's see here. Robert wants to know, where is the square point on a 2011 Skyrocket 8 car? The 1 3/4 square tube that the rear lower brackets are mounted to.
That is very correct. them squares are in the car square. So we square the rear end to what we want for lead and trail off of there. And then if you were to measure off the ball joints back to there, it should be on an 8-car pretty darn square at that point.
Michael's got a recommendation for Craig with the motor issues. Talk about replacing the starter button. Try it. Fooled me once for a while with nearly the same issue. Yeah, that's a possibility too. I never thought about that. Josh, if
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I eliminated the starter button, and we use that one where it's the whatever you call it, where you push up and it sets back. Knock on wood. I don't know if I've ever had one of them go bad.
Gotcha.
I've had plenty of buttons go bad. I've never had one of them switches go bad.
Kind of like what the Cup guys run. But
yeah, it's like, what do they call it? Momentary or something? Is that the right word? Yeah. You just, I'm knock on wood. We've not ever had one of them go bad, but, you know, the other thing I was thinking also, don't rule out if he's got that's why I don't run a master disconnect and I don't run a solenoid. Remember back in the day, I've never really run a master disconnect. Brad McEwen, I'll drop that name, fought a problem, and it was in his master disconnect.
Well, I definitely know solenoids have been an issue from time to time. I had that problem when I raced one time, was a solenoid went bad. Let's see here. Josh, if you were
also one more on that ground, Bob.
Yeah.
We had fought our open car with an intermittent miss, and talking with some MSD people, they say on a ground, you want a separate ground for everything that you're grounding. So if you're grounding the head, that goes to one stud. If you're grounding your tack, that goes to another stud. If you're grounding your box, that goes to another stud. So however many ground wires you have, that's how many ground studs you need, because they say if you have interference or something in one system, that can contaminate your whole system. So if you have separate grounds for each thing, that's supposedly a big plus for us too. Our intermittent miss once was RFI, radio frequency interference, and it was through the spark plug wires. So we changed out the cool badass spark plug wires and put some good, I think Blue Maxes on it that Kevin Stowa recommended, and our intermittent miss went away.
Huh. Yeah, it's amazing. Josh, if you were to run a 3-link in an A mod, what style 3-link would you run? Can you run a spring pull bar with a 3-link? Well, you definitely could. You could run whatever you would want to. I would probably lean towards either a spring bar or a biscuit bar. In fact, I don't know. I'd maybe actually even lean towards a biscuit bar on a 3-link car. What's your?
We've won a lot of races on the old 3-link biscuit bar. That's for sure.
Yeah,
that was a pretty good Harris car back in the day. That's that won a lot of races.
Yeah, and that was the big biscuits.
Yep, pretty simple.
Okay. Jeremiah, call Sherman Enterprises. They are strictly 3-link chassis. Robert, also with a 2011 Skyrocket with the Chevelle clip, would it be much of an improvement to switch to the 3-piece spindles or stay with the Pinto spindles?
I like, in today's world, old school would be is putting caster gain, and then when you turn the wheels, it jacks the car and puts traction in it through transferring weight to the back tires. In today's world, we want the front end to steer the best it can so we can go through the corner as fast as we can. The 3-piece spindle being someone like a 7 or 8 degree spindle versus the stock Pinto, which is somewhere into 11 degrees. If you watch, and we were able to figure this out a long time ago, some inexperienced driver had Pinto, and we had a front end on our car at the time that had a caster gain front end, and he's turning left and right. He's steering the car way more than it needs to be because he was a little bit out of control. And you could literally see the right front jack up, unjack, jack up, unjack, jack up every time you turn the steering wheel. We went to more of a 0 caster gain front end and the 3-piece spindles. and you can crank on the wheels, and you can almost virtually eliminate all the jacking in the front. Now, you might not have quite as much traction, but it ain't always about traction, it's drivability. So eliminating that jacking can make more drivability in your race car.
Well, it's definitely smoother through phase 2 of the corner because you don't have the drag, like you said, you don't have the jacking effect, and you don't have the drag that all that caster gain gives you, and it just makes the car drive smoother. Now, you have to call Kelly and find out what ball joints he'll want you to change to, because this isn't putting the 3-piece spindles aren't necessarily completely a bolt-on deal. You might have to change a couple other things there, Robert. Pat, one of the best memories of Kelly was at Humboldt many years ago. He started dead last on a Saturday night feature and he won. I've been the number one hero, or he's been my number one hero for that time on. Awesome. Way to go, Pat. Well, hell, Pat's all of our heroes. I mean, missed him this year at the Super Nationals. God, it was just like, I mean, it just wasn't the right place. I mean, there was nobody in Bender Row that was keeping us all square and keeping us all excited, and I didn't know what to think of that whole deal, to be honest. Finally, by the eighth day, I came accustomed to it, and of course, at that point in time, I really didn't give a hoot who was in Bender Row. I was more interested in watching Saturday night's races and going home.
I give Pat a little bit of grief. First year Pat don't show up and Shryock wins. So hopefully he wasn't our bad luck jinx, but I assured him that wasn't the case. Hopefully we can do another one of them someday, and he'll be there to actually get to witness me do it.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, well, we are up on the count, so we're going to call it an evening. Once again, today's the 23rd, so we will be back here October 7th. Where's your next race, Kelly?
We're going to try to go somewhere. Mike Howen, the Lake Mills Motorsports stock car owner, he's I think he's had enough fun with the stock car. He says he's got to go to work, and I guess he's got to go make some more money so we can continue to do what we do. So stock cars at this time is parked, and then we're going to try to concentrate on our modified and see if we can get that blue and orange suit in Victory Lane somewhere along the way at the end of the year here.
Awesome. Well, that would be awesome. Well, good luck on all that. And it was definitely nice to have you on. Congratulations on such a great year. And that was pretty cool seeing you win the Super Nationals. So that was exciting.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And thanks, Chad, for all you do for the racing world, man. You make some awesome parts, and it's I don't know where we'd be if we didn't have you. So we appreciate all you guys do for us.
Yeah, thank you for sticking with us.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
See you, everybody.
See you, everybody.